Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us either here in person or online. So we're here, very happy to be hosted at the Digital Innovation Pavilion here at COP29. And we're here to talk about challenges and opportunities for youth climate empowerment. We are here on the thematic day, which includes youth here at the COP. So there are many events happening to engage young people and have critical conversations around how we can further empower youth for meaningful climate action. So I'm Timothy Damon. I'm founder and president of the Global Youth Development Institute, and it is our mission to engage and empower the next generation of young sustainability leaders. And we do that by bringing them to engage in these events, in the subsidiary bodies of the COP meetings, and also by giving them training and empowerment to understand how to implement action for climate empowerment, ACE, at home, at the national and subnational level. And we're very happy to be joined by some amazing leaders who are also going to get to talk about their work and engage with us on this question of what challenges are facing youth in terms of implementing climate empowerment and climate action, and then also what opportunities or solutions could there be that we could bring forward to address those issues. As just a quick overview, for those who aren't familiar with ACE, that refers to Article 6 of the Convention from 1992 and Article 12 of the Paris Agreement from 2015. And there are 6 elements of ACE. We have education, training, public participation, access to information, awareness raising, and international cooperation on those 5 areas. And this is a really critical topic for everyone, not only for young people, because these are really critical tools that we need in order to implement any other kind of climate action. If you want to talk about mitigation, you are going to need to use some of these tools. For example, if your NDC has a commitment to transitioning to renewable energy as part of meeting it, well, have you answered the question of how you will have enough professionals who are trained in solar deployment or wind deployment to be able to meet that commitment? And so it really gets to, is the K-12 curriculum in the country supporting STEM? Is it supporting young people to then take on a tertiary studies in a relevant field or a technical program so that they know how to do those jobs? So ACE is very much about creating jobs for young people and for everyone. And even on the adaptation side or the resilience building side, communities need to know what climate impacts are going to affect them in order to be able to meaningfully take action to adapt and respond to that. So you need both the public participation aspect, because you can't be leaving communities behind from the higher level, subnational, national level policies that are being taken. But they also need to have accurate information about the climate science to know, is it more drought or more flood that they need to be prepared for? Or is it both, right? So in any type of climate action, as we're talking about any of these topics, you're going to likely need to draw on at least some of these elements of ACE. And that's personally why I've been passionate in following it since 2016 now, and have created GYDI to work on that. And it's why colleagues have also created their organizations as well and are working on these initiatives. So to start us off, we have the first question will be on, what are the challenges that you have been facing in your work of trying to do climate empowerment for young people? And you can start us off also by telling us about yourself and the work that you're doing, and then go into what some of the challenges are. And I'm very happy to start with Hussein. So here we go.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for the opportunity too. So, like you said, my name is Hussein Kissim. I'm from Ghana. I'm the executive director and founder of the Center for Climate and Sustainability Empowerment. It's a youth-focused and youth-driven non-governmental organization with a main vision of empowering young people to be able to come up with innovative ideas towards climate change mitigation and adaptation in marginalized and vulnerable communities in Ghana. So, as part of the activities that we do, we have a flagship program called the Young Climate Innovators Program. And then basically it's targeting students at the university level to be able to educate them, empower them, and engage them to be able to come up with innovative ideas. Just like Samuel said, before you be able to do any mitigation or adaptation project or any intervention, you would need education, you would need training, you need access to information. And these are the key elements we're talking about as far as ACE is concerned. So in terms of education, we partner with UNITA, and we've developed some sort of curriculum to be able to educate these kids, because we believe very well that without the education, it will be quite challenging for them or to plug them into the communities to be able to implement their projects. And one of the major challenges, like you say, we've encountered is access to information, which is one of the key elements of ACE, in the sense that, yes, after educating them, we actually wanted them to implement the project, but we know very well that because climate change cuts across, and you need information for all the various sectors to be able to come out with your innovation. It was quite challenging because each agency, ministry were working in silos. So getting that information was quite challenging because there is no any centralized point where these innovators could just go in and get the type of information they need to be able to implement their project. So that was one of the key challenges. The other thing is, after even coming up with the innovation, one major challenge was funding, because to be able to get the funding to be able to implement the innovation was quite also challenging. So these are the two key challenges that I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Hussein. Yes, and certainly, having the right information to inform action, and then also some finance is helpful as well to be able to move the implementation along. So we're really excited by what YClip is doing there in Ghana and CCSC. Very happy to work together on a lot of the ACE activities, so we have high hopes for that. I will also plug that Ghana is one of the countries that has a climate change learning strategy as a national policy. And this is very important because some of the recommendations that we have for what countries should be doing to advance ACE include having a national ACE strategy. And a climate change learning strategy is still very much focused on education and some training. So it's not a holistic ACE national strategy, but it's definitely an important step in the right direction, and is another example of things that countries should be doing in order to not be siloed, exactly as you were saying. And so with that, we're very happy now to turn to our next speaker, Mahnur, and tell us about your work.
Thank you. So I am currently working with a youth-led youth-serving organization that is called Climate Forward Pakistan. But a lot of work that I do is not specifically associated with my organization affiliation. I also work with other organizations that are specifically focused about the intersection of gender and climate. So the main focus, I'd say, has been on working with children, and that to Afghan refugees that are not registered in Pakistan, have been displaced internally, and therefore do not have that kind of access to formal education system or any kind of social security. And the other group of people that I work with is young women that belong from the mountains communities. In both of these cases, there is a lack of basic infrastructure that could actually provide them with the kind of access to information, or even help them participate publicly into the system that feeds in climate action at the government level. Talking specifically about children, the people who have been migrated specifically are political refugees and do not have access to social security, are often more vulnerable to climate change. And so what I have seen is that these vulnerabilities are often not even discussed, not mentioned, not even politically acknowledged in the government system. So first of all, Pakistan does not have an ace focal point and therefore not an ace national strategy. But the issue, the other point is that even if we do get to a point to have both of these things, the question will be that a lot of a major part of the displaced population is not properly recorded, is not identified, is not acknowledged. So, what would be the procedures to actually help them get also included into that system of information, and then whatever actions plans the plan accordingly keeping in mind their vulnerabilities. And the mountain communities in specific have this higher vulnerability in getting displaced, but however, for example, the women in those areas do not have that kind of empowerment, that when you go to them and talk about climate change, there's often this reluctance to understand the issue and how it basically is a threat multiplier, and connects with other parts of their identities. For example, socioeconomic inequalities, gender discrimination that we face on a daily basis. How does it actually relate to that and exacerbate the existing problems? So creating that kind of a linkage is often a huge problem. And therefore, what we have started, in order to at least make a little bit of improvement, is by going into these communities and providing them with disaster management skills. Whenever a disaster hits, because we know that what kind of vulnerability in terms of climate change they have, whenever a disaster hits, they at least have the basic skills to cope with it. So, for example, focusing especially on sexual and reproductive rights, and giving them the kind of tools. So, whenever some kind of disaster hits, they know how to manage their menstruation, for example, in a dignified way. And the same case goes for the kids that are refugees, so that they know that how they can, strengthen their communities, and whenever there is some kind of natural disaster, how to actually help themselves and help their communities get under.
Thank you. And you've highlighted there a lot of the really ground level challenges, which are why we need these frameworks of action for climate empowerment, and why we need to actually make that real for people on the ground. Because the climate, we already have all of these problems as society, even before climate change is being added on top of them. And then as soon as we have more climate related disasters and risks which are happening, it's just exacerbating all of these problems that we've already had. And so, this is where the intersectionality comes in of addressing climate change alongside of women's issues, youth issues, marginalized communities, and all of these. And I think sometimes perhaps it's a reluctance of some governments out there to include marginalized communities. That is maybe why they're a little reluctant to focus on the public participation element of these. It's much more comfortable to focus just on formal education, but when you have to start to talk about including everyone in society and moving them toward that common objective, that often create some subnational political tensions or other kinds of dynamics that exist within a people in a place. And you also touched on the need for more institutionalization as well to support ACE. And both this and finance are things we'll come back to in our second round, where we're talking about the opportunities and solutions. But before that, we're still very happy next to hear from Sutiso regarding the work that you're doing in youth climate empowerment and some of the challenges that you've experienced.
Thank you so much, Tim. I'm Sutiso Kasaya from Zambia, and I'm a co-founder of an organization called True Public Engagement, and we work to educate, empower, and engage youth so as to take tackle climate change, take particular action. We focus mainly on youth in rural areas, but also go beyond Zambia. for us, as people who've grown up in like the urban areas, we have seen that there's more with inclusion for us, and there's been a gap with what are in rural areas. So that's why we keep them as our priority. And our country has been going through droughts this entire year, and it has affected so many young people. Everyone is affected, and many people in the rural areas depend on agriculture for their living. They depend on farming, and so we work towards. We've had different initiatives. We work towards educating them and training them on more sustainable, climate-friendly farming methods, so that they can be able to have a harvest. Because the youths that side are really suffering. They don't have the right education to go work anywhere else, and they're selling their animals like a bag of the meat. It's not because Shima, they're selling cattle just to get a bag of the meat, which will only last them for like 2-3 days, and their cattle would have been a better investment. And while we did all these, we discovered that there are other challenges and gaps that are needed for youth in rural areas, and we started an initiative of introducing climate change clubs, both in the rural area and in the urban area. And the whole point of the clubs is to help educate them and train them and give them the access to information that they need when it comes to tackling climate change. And also why we included like people in the urban area, especially those in private schools, for them to be able to see the perspective of what's happening to the people in the rural areas, and for them to have some sense of stewardship, to know how to take care of the aid and contribute better, because for their actions, other people are suffering for what they are doing. And it's also a way for us to just keep track of knowing what's going on, because we believe it's easier to tackle this climate change when you're learning directly from their perspective. In as much as we have the information, we might not know what they exactly need and what's going on with them. So the climate change clubs would be a way for us to know what is happening in each community, and which communities do we need to urgently tackle, which communities do we urgently need to get involved and solve. So it will also be a way for us to track everything that's going on in Zambia, and also we're looking at having the youth included, because some might have an interest when it comes to the international process. They might have interest to come to COP and want to be able to like bring them here. We had our first delegate from the rural area who've been able to bring to COP29, and it's a good experience for him. It's a learning experience for him, and we want to be able to have their voices heard here, because they are the ones who understand better what's going on in their communities, unlike us. And as we have worked with these youth, something we've also noticed is, in as much we do not have youth inclusion, also Zambia has 73 different languages, and also the access for information is there, but the only challenge is the transition of the language. Everything is in English. Those people in the US, in the rural areas, are able to access this information. So we're also working with FAO to translate some materials which will be used in the climate change clubs to 7 local languages that many used in Zambia. That way we can make sure they are also getting access to the information, and everything is being transmitted to them, and they are not being left behind. So like as we have worked with these youth, the other challenge that we found is like lack of funding. Funding is an issue when it comes to youth. It's something that we're still working on. We want to be able to see how can we also just find funding in as much for our projects, but for their projects. In our project, we have one for arts, and this is an opportunity for the youth to create art, those who have got an interest when it comes to art, because people learn through different ways, people express themselves through different ways, and we're trying to meet them where they're at. We understand not everyone can learn through formal education, some people learn through informal education, so we're trying to use art, music, reading, anything, crafts, cooking, just to get them and just to help them understand better. Because when you ask a farmer, do you know what climate change is? A farmer will tell you no, but when you ask them, how long did your maize take to grow? How long has it taken to grow now? They'll be like, oh, the difference is like that's climate change, and they'll understand better. And some people understand through music. So many also like the arts that they'll be making is for them, the whole idea is for them to paint art. And those arts is a way to tell their story. So for them to be able to express themselves through art of what's going on, what's the solution that you need. And also the arts that we're going to be getting from them, we're going to have art exhibitions, and once we sell off that art, it's money that's going to get back invested in their community. Because something else that we've noticed is that in as much as we want to educate people, tell them, oh, you need to change, climate change, you need to adapt, you need to train them, but at the end of the day, we need to understand that people also need to make a living, and they will not be invested if it's something that can't help them. Because if you're educating them and it's not helping them in a way, they'll be like, what's the point? But we're trying to see how can we help them, how can we also empower them as we teach them about climate change, how can we bring about environmental stewardship in all this.
Thank you, Sifiso, and even more really inspiring examples of what's going on at the ground level when it comes to ACE. You know, without food, there is no life, and so having farmers who understand how to adapt to climate change, communities that know how to deal with what's affecting them, access to information that works through all the different languages, especially local or more indigenous languages that are spoken within a country, very, very important to the public participation aspect. And you also were very eagerly giving us some solutions and some of the kinds of work that you're doing as well in terms of the climate clubs, but maybe you can come back and tell us more about that in the next round as well. So to transition us into now our second half, focusing more on some of the opportunities and the innovative solutions. So we've heard from all of our speakers about finance and a need for more institutional support. So some of the recommendations that we've developed on that, which are also coming out of this more global UNFCCC kind of level of ACE, would be to have an ACE platform. The name isn't important, that's just a functional description for now, but it would serve as a mechanism to have more centralization of all of the different activities that are going on. And that would have a lot of benefits in terms of fostering more collaboration between different projects and stakeholders. It would help us in terms of the monitoring, evaluation, and reporting of climate change, because you'd be able to have more centralized flows of information in terms of what's going on. Because right now it can be very challenging. You want to know what's going on with ACE in a particular country. Well, you might be lucky to find some report somewhere that happened to capture that. We do now have the annual summary report being prepared by the Secretariat. That was a new development that came out of the Glasgow Work Program from COP26. So that's a step in the right direction, but of course that's only capturing a very few. You have to know that they put out a call for submission. So if you're on a grassroots organization or a marginalized community, you're not going to show up in that reporting because you didn't know that there was a report. You might not even know what climate change is, as Sifiso was saying. So there's that big gap that is leaving a lot of people behind. And so having this platform and broadening it out, making it more flat and inclusive for information to be shared would also be a benefit to a lot of those entities and persons. And then you can have as well a financial component to this, which is something, again, we have a working title of the ACE Marketplace, so-called because it's envisioned to target the private and other sources of finance, because we know how difficult it is trying to target the public sources of finance. That is the core of the disagreement that exists here at the finance COP in Baku. We're still seeing whether or not the overall climate finance will work from that angle. So we need to also leverage the other sources, but how, where? Youth organizations can't just walk up to the Gates Foundation or the Buffett Foundation and say, oh, hey, we want to do an ACE project, give us some money. So what we really need is for the philanthropies and the corporate social responsibility and these other sources to have somewhere they could go that has a repository, a catalog, if you will, of a lot of these different project proposals and initiatives. This would really help to democratize the funding a lot, because of course, youth NGOs are often struggling to access finance. They're not accredited with the Green Climate Fund or the GEF to be able to get those fundings. And usually the increments of funding that they would be using are so small that, a big foundation, Bloomberg, any of those are not really, they're not the right audience for that. They're only dealing in projects that are 6 or 7 or more figures, not supporting a particular community that maybe only needs a few $1,000s for a project. So having this marketplace would allow more of that exchange to happen, and it would give a way to emphasize to those potential funders that, hey, governments have said ACE is important. It's been there. We've known that since 1992. But here is a spot you can go instead of just saying, well, this is important, give it support. So these are some of the ideas that we've been developing in these last years, trying to get these things pushed into the Glasgow Work Program and the action plan. Very difficult with the intergovernmental negotiations to get these things in. But I will just flag as a bright spot that, we have the decision for ACE that came out of this COP was a very good one. And, last year in Dubai, we unfortunately had ended up with 0 progress on the ACE agenda item there. And we were able to make a comeback from that through the SB that happened in June. We were able to get a good draft text, and then we were able to actually get that text through here in Baku. So there will now be a space. All these discussions that we're having here in this event will now have a formal entry point into the UNFCCC process through that annual summary report we mentioned, because we broadened the scope of the call for submissions to now include progress, challenges, and improvements for ACE implementation, including financial and technical support. And that might not seem like a lot, that it's actually very obvious to us, but from a governmental standpoint, developed countries had not wanted that word finance to appear in the text previously. So this was a sign of good progress, and we really hope that we'll be able to leverage that toward the next entry point in the negotiations, which will be the midterm review of the Glasgow Work Program and our action plan, which will take place in June in 2026. So having set the stage there with some of the innovative solutions and opportunities that we have to work on this, we'll go through the second round for our panel here to hear what are some of the opportunities that you see, what are some of the proposals, or what would help you to do the work to overcome the challenges that you've discussed in your first round in terms of your experiences. And so we'll come back to Hussein to start us off.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tim. I think one of the ways is to look at the existing funds available, financial mechanisms available, because like you say, it's quite challenging trying to get a dedicated funding for ACE. And for me, I know that yes, we will certainly get there, but that will take a lot of time. And so there's the need to let people understand, or government and policymakers understand that yes, ACE exists. We need ACE to be able to implement almost all the projects that we do. But then in order to do that, we want to make sure that in each of the projects that the government is doing, there should be an element of ACE associated with it. So if you are doing a mitigation project, then there should be a way of creating awareness, training, and ensuring that the public gets involved in the process. So this is one way. The other way too is those funding mechanisms like the GCF, the JEF, they should also make it as a requirement, because that way, a requirement that before a project is approved, there should be 1 or 2 elements of ACE in there. That way, some of us who are working on ACE will be able to plug into some of these funding facilities available. Apart from that, I always say that we need to ACE our policymakers to let them understand that yes, ACE is not just restricted to education, it goes beyond that. And yes, we have all the 6 elements of ACE. For them to understand, and when they get to understand, then it becomes a bit easier for us to get to them and let them understand that yes, this is an ACE initiative that we want to have. Just like what I talked about, the access to information. As part of our project that we want to do, we want to create a platform where we'll connect all the agencies, all the ministries in Ghana to get all their interventions that they've done, and then put it on the platform so that when people want access to that information, it becomes a bit easier. But then, before we'll be able to do that, we need to get to the policymakers for them to understand that, yes, this is an element of ACE. We need funding to be able to do this. And that is the only way we can get them to support whatever initiative we are doing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Hussein. So those are also really important recommendations. You know, if we could actually get ACE as a project criterion in the entities of the financial mechanism, that would be huge, right? That would say, oh, you know, you want to have a Green Climate Fund project? Well, where's your ACE component within that? And as we've touched on previously, every project already probably could connect to at least one of the elements of ACE somewhere anyway, so would really only just be making it more intentional. And that would help to lead to better outcomes. And it's not adding a new burden to a project. If nothing else, you can do awareness raising about, through a project. So there's always some avenue for ACE to be included in any of those. But that will take some time for us to get to, but we're building toward these, and these are things that we can also push for in this process in 2026. But as stakeholders, we also can't wait. We need also solutions that we can implement without waiting on our governments. So we'll work on those as well. And to continue along with the panel, we're very happy to come to McNur again. So you've seen what we're doing with the second round. So what would you like to add?
For me, I take once again the example of Pakistan. So, like almost 35% of children, like around 25 million, are out of school. So, in order for us to think about ACE in a country like this, would mean to not only incorporate educational awareness elements and the 6 elements of ACE into the formal education system, but also have a kind of strategy that caters to out of school children, that caters to the displaced populations, that caters to the people who are not registered or recognized, and even the indigenous populations that have had their entire cultures erased. And then there's also this intersection of health that is incorporated into it, so that like, how do you cater to a young population that is facing all of these inequalities and does not have access to education, and therefore they are not part of the process where they can actually make any decision or become part of the solution, and they're facing so much anxiety related to it. How do you cater to that kind of population? For me, it's a major issue that a country that is like 5th most vulnerable to climate change does not even have an ACE focal point. That tells me about how on the global level ACE is not getting the kind of recognition or understanding that is required. And therefore, this would be really imperative that countries start to understand that ACE obviously goes beyond education. It is more than just, awareness. And while even if we do limit it majorly to education awareness, how important of an element those are, because without the grassroots being involved into the solution, we cannot think of proper comprehensive climate action that is fast and that is just. So we need to have, that kind of community involved. So for me, it is really important, first of all, to have that kind of institutionalization of ACE at a global level, where the countries can encourage, even push each other to become better. There's this a process of accountability, as well as a platform where good practices are shared. So I know that Pakistan is not alone in this case. There are so many other countries that can actually share those kind of good practices and help each other improve where they're lacking. And when it comes to finance, I've seen that in ACE, especially in Pakistan, most of the work is being done by youth organizations that are majorly operating voluntarily, and their work is unpaid. So there is only so much that you can do while having no access at your access to finance at your hands. So there needs to be this kind of, even if we like the processes that you have suggested, even if we do like get finance, we need to make sure that it is actually accessible to the young people as well. And there's also like a proper dedicated focus upon their capacity building as to how their projects can be better, or a kind of like incubation center that we have also talked about with ACE in our discussions before. This kind of capacity building would actually help the young people access those finance more easily, and it will be more accessible for them. So,
Yes, these are critical points as well, and absolutely there needs to be that accessibility aspect. So along with the ACE marketplace, we would see that it could have this incubator component, exactly as we've been discussing and developing that idea. So not all young people have an NGO. Not all of them would know how to write a sound project proposal, to make a appropriate budget. So it's not only that we'd be able to have this connection of supply and demand side, but the demand side also needs help and capacity building to be able to meaningfully access those funds. And just to expand a little on the ACE focal points as well, this is for more than 10 years been one of the recommendations that we've had for what countries should do in the process. We are now finally at the point where about 70% of the countries have designated someone as an ACE focal point, but there are obviously still gaps, as you said. And even among a lot of the countries that have appointed someone to that role, they have not really put them in a strong position to succeed. Of course, it's been left as a flexible, country-driven, definition of what an ACE focal point would do. But there are certain common features of what they should do. If you think about it logically, they should be helping to ensure that all of the members of the country are connected into the ACE-related and climate empowerment activities. They should be the ones who are helping to coordinate across the different ministries that all need to work together. A jobs ministry, environment ministry, education ministry. They need to talk to each other. Someone has to do that. And as well, who's going to champion and sort of coordinate having that national ACE strategy that we talked about? Well, helps to have a focal point to do that. And where you were mentioning, more of the international cooperation aspect in terms of sharing experiences between countries, again, who's going to do that? ACE focal points are one of the key linkages that are meant to help that happen in the process, because they can gather together in Bonn or in the regional climate weeks or in these other activities to be able to exchange their experiences. And so that if in the US we want to know what's going on in Ghana for ACE, we know who to call, right? And that we have someone to call them and vice versa. So these are, again, some of the challenges and solutions where we know what to do, but we still need to do a better job at actually implementing it. And so with that, we're very happy to come back to Sifiso again for your thoughts on this conversation.
Thank you so much, Steve. I think for me, I would say youth inclusion. I think we really need to get youth involved in these processes, both internationally and locally. And also for locally, I would say that we need to have people from the rural areas, people who are really affected by climate change, be included more often. And also, I also bring, as Hussein and Manuel have also mentioned, but it's also something that I always keep in my mind, is that people need to stop thinking of ACE as just education. ACE is all 6 elements, and each element is interconnected to each other and depends on each other. And I think also when we talk about the elements, public participation, I feel is something that's very important, because once youth or people feel included, it's very easy to train them and educate them and give them access to information. In as much as we might have so much information, and also educate them and try to train them as much as we can, but as long as they do not feel included, it's very difficult to get to them. It's like talking to a brick wall. And also one thing we also need to keep in mind, it's not only about international cooperation, we should also think about local cooperation. We need, even as youth ourselves, we need to be as inclusive as possible and learn to collaborate with people and just try to learn best practices from each other within a country and within like the international space. And also, I will touch on the finance sector. I would say that we need to have more funds that are youth included, not only just for youth in urban areas, but we need to make sure that youth in rural areas can be able to access those fundings, because mainly, yes, there could be some funding. FAO has got, they're launching some initiative as COP29, probably already launched it. It's an initiative that will help youth get funding easier, but that is easier for youth that are in urban areas. What about the youth in rural areas? As you mentioned, not everyone can be able to register an organization, or not everyone can be able to draft a contract or anything, a project proposal, but they need that, they have brilliant ideas and need that funding. So we need to make sure that funding is accessible to everyone, both in the urban and rural areas. That's why our climate change club should be more like a platform to bring all these youth together, for them to exchange ideas, bring all their innovative solutions, and also for us to be able to help them access these funding. We might not be able to help them because we might have limited capacity, but we want to be able to help as much as we can. And we also want those youth to be able to help others and pass on the information, because as youth and people just in general, we should be able to exchange what we should be able to give back what we've been given back, and that way we're able to empower people more and reach a larger number. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sipiso. So at this point, we do have 10 minutes remaining. So if there are any additions to this conversation from our members of the audience, we really welcome you to join in at this point. Or if there are any questions, comments. Yes, is that a yes?
Thank you so much for this interesting conversation. I would like to ask respectable panelists about the incorporation of ACE, because it is very simple for a young person like me to understand that how important ACE is. But there is this, I believe that there are words that are more in use, vocabulary that is more in use today, that basically incorporates into the what ACE really is. For example, we talk about capacity building, we talk about grassroots level initiatives more. We use this vocabulary more than when we say that we are working on ACE. So, how much do you think the popular vocabulary has played a part in basically putting ACE in the backdrop and having this local initiatives and local vocabulary at the forefront of it? And how much do you think that this is the reason that ACE is not getting its due place that you guys all are working toward?
Thank you for the question. So do we have panelists who would like to respond?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. Yes, I think, like you said, there's that little conflict between ACE, capacity building, because in a way they all have the same objective. Okay, but then one unique thing about ACE is we just not focusing on just education or building the capacity of the people, but it goes beyond that. Like we keep saying, we have 6 elements, which all of them are interconnected in one way or the other. So if we keep limiting ourselves to just education and then let's say training, then we are actually not achieving the objectives of ACE. So for one of the ways of doing that is trying to see how we can create awareness at the grassroots level. And like I said, even with policymakers, so that for them to understand that, yes, the people need capacity, but then you can do this and achieve better outcome as compared to just focusing on educating them and then giving them some sort of training. But then if you think ACE as a holistic approach, which consists of all the different elements, then you realize that the outcome out of the project or initiative which is being done is far better than just focusing on capacity building. All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. And I think the little bit that I'll add on to here is, sort of this discrepancy that you've asked about in terms of why ACE isn't being recognized. Some of it is a communication problem. There's a lot of people who are doing ACE, but they don't know what ACE is. They're not familiar with this process and the language and the terminology and all of that. And really, from a certain standpoint, we don't need them to be. Not everyone needs to be an expert in how the UNFCCC process works and how negotiations work, and even know what these texts are. But they do need to know how to do ACE, whether it's any of those 6 elements. And they need to know that they are part of a community of other people who are working toward the same things. And that's where I think there's more that we can do in terms of the community building. And this goes back to the institutional support and having a platform for ACE, because it's not about getting everyone to know this is what ACE is and it's Article 6 of this and 12 of that. It's knowing, hey, we need education, we need public participation, we need to know what's going on. And I'm not alone in doing that. There's these other people who want to do that. And so it really is about building the community and that level of action rather than building the technical knowledge of this, wonky UNFCCC space. And so that's where we really need some of that social innovation to happen, community building to happen. And that's what's going to unlock more progress for ACE, more so than just a top-down technical explanation of what it is. Because people are doing it. They even just, if I sit next to you on a bus and you ask what I do or what I study, and I'm like, oh, climate change, you're like, climate change, is that a thing? And I'm like, well, yes, it is. And did you know this? And then you get off the bus and you're thinking, this is a real anecdote from when I was studying at UEA. I sat down next to a business school student on the bus, and he left that bus knowing more about what climate change was and not being as much of a skeptic anymore. It's like every individual person has the capacity to do ACE. You just have to talk about these topics to other people and make them more aware. So there's many ways in which we can all start to do it, and if we're all doing that, then that's going to take us all in the direction that we need to go. And I think for the sake of time, we'll give a final intervention opportunity to our other 2 panelists.
I'll just briefly answer the question as well, because it's really interesting in that. While it is true that maybe it's a communication problem as well, I also believe that there might be a little bit of deliberate ignorance of this on part of the governments and parties. And the reason I say this is because climate education awareness are relatively easier and much more acknowledged and celebrated elements of ACE, or generally everybody is doing that, so it's easier to acknowledge them. But when it comes to public participation and the access to information, in my opinion, they are much more political and difficult elements of ACE to deal with, especially for the governments, because they are essentially corresponding to a lot of the political systems that the countries might have in their states. So, for example, it might not always be a choice or easy option for a particular state to give access to the right kinds of information to the public, because it might not play in their favor. And similarly, access to public participation also deals with elements of democracy, for example. So it might not always be in favor of a lot of states to enable that. So for me, it is a problem of communication, but also it is like a strategic I'd say ignorance of the issue as well. Because these 2 or 3 elements that are often not discussed are given importance to, in my opinion, are the most important elements of this.
I think you've covered most of it, but I think we need to stop thinking of ACE as education. Let's just think of it as a toolkit because it's needed in all areas of climate action. When you talk about mitigation or adaptation, you still need education in as much as you need training, in as much as you need access to information or public participation or public awareness and international cooperation. So we need to think of it as a toolkit and that each element depends on the other element of ACE.
So with that, we are sadly out of time, but it's been a really wonderful discussion. So thank you to all of our panelists for contributing today. And a really heartfelt thank you as well to our dear friends Miroslav and the Digital Innovation Pavilion for hosting us here on this Youth Day. Wishing everyone success out there, whether you're here in Baku or watching us from elsewhere. We can all contribute to that family and community of climate change action, working on ACE, and so we all hope for the best. Take care.